Morning, new week on Life Creatives videos. First off, is I wanted to say thank you for watching, because it's a really huge reminder that I am not separate, that you are not separate, and we are both cells of a system of reality. So thank you for that. I was reviewing some of the prior weeks, and you may have gotten the impression that happiness is not a goal for me, or something that I wish for, let's say that. And it is, and I definitely wish it for you. And I want to talk about a really fundamental idea, and I'm going to say a fundamental tip into creating a life, or opening a life, right? Opening a reality that already exists, so that stability and peace and harmony can flow in today. So I've talked about how viewing happiness as a destination or a fixed goal doesn't seem to really work, and I've talked about how our addiction to comfort really puts armors around our hearts and atrophies our zest for life. And today I want to talk about the mind again, and I want to talk about how great it feels to dissolve the allegiance to the ego mind. So the first thing I want to do is define ego mind and define what I call greater mind. Greater mind is Albert Einstein. Greater mind is Mother Teresa. Greater mind is when I sit down to write poetry, when you sit down to do your creative works and in your innovations. That's your greater mind. Your ego mind is the one that doesn't well up with creativity and then burst. It's the one that's running all the time like a weak motor and dictating your superficial desires. That's your ego mind. Your ego mind says your hair looks bad today. Your ego mind says your hair looks great today. Your ego mind says eat that cake. Your ego mind says things like if this, then this. If this, then this. Small. Right? The ego mind really works in a narrow pathway. And it's hard to distinguish the difference between our greater mind and our ego mind. And so we listened to them both. We listened to everything that our mind says, hoping that we're going to get that that creative burst that's going to help ourselves and other people, right? So the fundamental tip for today for opening up our reality to let harmony flow in is to dissolve our allegiance to the ego mind. And the easiest way to dissolve it, which I'll talk about in a little bit, is just to pay attention of what the product is, just to pay attention of what it really brings you. I guess I'm just gonna give you the honest truth, right? That's always a good place to begin because it doesn't have a lot of stuff on top of it. So here I am. I'm a seeker of truth. I'm a seeker of well-being, fundamental well-being, and I've always been wondering how to do that. And for a long time, the only thing I was relying on was my mind. Like, that's the only way that I could categorize and decipher, this is a good way, this is not such a good way to go. You know, how do I cultivate? How do I build? How do I build this life of well-being? Then this past year, I had a few seizures. I had some grand mal seizures. I needed to go to the doctor. And I had these seizures during a year of great accomplishment for me. So what I mean is I graduated from my master's. I got my dream job, which was to be a community college professor. I got partnered to the person that I love most in the world, and I did everything that I thought was on the checklist to be happy, and I still had this thing that scared me and everyone that I love. I still had it. It didn't add up. You know, I did 1 + 2 + 3, and it didn't add up to stability, harmony, peace, and happiness. And that really woke up in not just here, but in the way you know things in your bone. You know how it's sort of a different knowing than the way you know algebra. It woke up the knowing in here that all of that adding up wasn't a useful way to get what I needed, to get what I desired, which is peace. And then I started noticing that my mind wastes a lot of time trying to figure out everything, trying to figure things, trying to calculate, when harmony is not calculable. Peace is not that. And so I started very smallly, because I am addicted, like everyone else, to my mind, to listening to it. It's the only thing that I have to listen to. I very slowly started to just have a healthy skepticism. Are you leading me to something that's going to open my reality? Are you? And more I realized it wasn't. So it's still chatting, let me tell you that. My ego mind is still chatting, just like everyone's ego mind is still chatting unless you are enlightened. It's running. But I just know here, in the bones knowing, that it's not telling me anything that I need in the now. Okay, so what I'm doing, instead of paying attention to it talking, which it is even now, is I'm starting to pay attention to other things. So I can describe this as you're in a field, and there's one singular tree, and then there is a big blue sky full of clouds, and for your whole life you've been told, look at this tree. So you've been really focusing on the tree. It's the only thing that's in the field. But then you start to realize that you're in a field full of grass with a giant big blue sky full of clouds, and all of a sudden, right, the entire perception is opened. There's more. There's more for you to pay attention to. So that's the same with ego mind, okay? I realized that there was more. So I wasn't listening to the chatting, even though it was still happening. I'm going to say that over and over. Still talking. I just wasn't listening to it, or I wasn't believing it. Sometimes I still listen to it, but I know in my bones knowing that it might not be helpful. And this is what it feels like. Because I think when we start to dissolve our allegiance, not believing in that rodent chatting mind, it feels more than it thinks it feels. So what I feel is calmer. What I feel is less fragile. I feel less like everything is going to turn me into knots, because my ego mind really is the one that turns me into knots. It says, you look great, and then the next day it says, you look horrible. And I can't figure out what it is. It says, eat that chocolate cake, and then it says, you jerk, now you're just gained all that weight and you have heartburn. My ego mind says, the most important thing for you is your close relationships, and then when my friend doesn't call me at 8 a.m. on my birthday, it says, your life is meaningless, right? And that's what turns me into knots. And so when I stopped listening to it is when I finally felt an untangling, a loose breath, a relaxed spine and nervous system, and alignment, and I realized something huge that I think the Buddha realized, which is you can be feeling horrible or you can be feeling great, and your mind can tell you what to value in that, what to think about what you're feeling, but it doesn't change the fact. It's just really hard to explain. It doesn't change the fact that everything's available to you. It doesn't change the fact that things are still moving, things are still living. You are still here. So you may be twisted in knots, and it may feel that you are less of yourself than when you're not twisted in knots, but it's still the same material that's twisted or untwisted. And when you realize that you're always the same material, no matter what you're thinking, when you realize that, then you feel fundamental peace, because you know in your bones knowing it's okay. So the homework for this week is to notice the difference between great mind and ego mind, and to try to dissolve the allegiance into believing the ego mind, whatever it's telling you, all moments of the day, so that you don't have to run yourself tired. You don't have to run yourself ragged. You could just be. So I'll see you next week, and I hope you're well.